Growing up, I always thought I had a normal childhood. I was raised in a home full of love, at least, that's what it felt like. My parents, both of them, gave me everything I needed. My mother, despite her stern nature, cared for me in a way that made me feel safe. There were moments of warmth, too, like when she would sit beside me at night and read me stories, her voice softening as the pages turned. But there was always a firmness to her, a boundary that I never quite understood. The discipline, the structure, it was as though she saw the world in black and white, and I was supposed to fit neatly into it. My father was different. More laid back, more likely to indulge me with small treats or tell me stories about his own childhood. But it was my mother who ran the house. I never knew anything other than her authoritarian presence, the way she controlled everything, even my thoughts at times. She had a vision for me, one where I succeeded, one where I was disciplined and on track. It wasn't until much later that I realized just how deeply her vision had shaped me, and how much of my own self-worth I tied to her approval. But when I turned 21, everything changed. I was sitting in the living room, flipping through old photo albums with my mother, when she casually dropped the bomb. "You know, your father and I adopted you when you were just 4 months old, right?" The words hung in the air for a long time, as if time itself had paused. I had always thought I was their biological child, despite never having looked quite like either of them. I never questioned it, their love had been enough. But now, suddenly, I was faced with a truth I had never considered. My hands froze on the photo album, my heart racing. The revelation left me stunned, confused, and for some reason, a little empty. I didn't ask many questions at first. I didn't need to. My mother's matter-of-fact tone made it clear that this wasn't something she thought was a big deal. She had told me as if it were simply another fact about my childhood, nothing more, nothing less. But it was a revelation that stuck with me. I looked at her differently, wondered if it had been easier for her to treat me the way she had because I was adopted. Did she love me in the same way she would have loved a biological child? Did she ever feel the need to be more distant because I wasn't truly hers? It didn't change the fact that I loved her or that I was grateful for the life she gave me. But it did change something inside me, something I couldn't put into words. It made me question the foundation of everything I had known, everything I had been taught. I had always thought I was just like everyone else, but now I had this piece of information that seemed to separate me from the rest. It wasn't just that I was adopted, it was how casually my mother had delivered the news. It made me wonder how much more she had kept from me. What other truths were hidden beneath the surface? But in the end, I pushed the questions aside. I wasn't ready to confront them, and I figured it was better to accept things as they were. I had a loving family. I had a good life. The adoption was a small detail in the grand scheme of things. Or so I convinced myself. It's strange how life can unfold in ways you never anticipate. I always thought my future would be a predictable series of events: get a job, settle down, get married, raise kids. And for the most part, it followed that script. When I married Mark, it felt like the culmination of everything I had worked toward, a dream come true. He was thoughtful, caring, and supportive in ways that made my world feel like it was falling into place. Together, we built a life, slowly but surely. Our daughter, Emily, arrived 2 years into our marriage, and she became the center of our world. She was smart, strong-willed, and so much like me in ways that made me smile and, at times, made me worry about her future. As she got older, I realized how much of myself I saw in her, the same stubbornness, the same curiosity, and a desire to find her own way. Now, at 17, Emily was finishing up her 11th grade year, and I could see the world beginning to open up to her. The plans I had for her life weren't mine to make. She was her own person, with her own goals, her own dreams. Mark and I were comfortable. We had a small but cozy home, our careers were stable, and we were content. But there was always something more I felt I could reach for, something just outside my grasp. That something arrived in the form of a career opportunity that changed everything. One evening, after dinner, Mark came to me with a proposal that would alter our entire trajectory. "There's an opening in the regional office," he said, excitement in his voice. "They're offering a promotion for a higher position, with a better salary. We could finally afford a bigger house, maybe even get Emily into a private school." At first, I was hesitant. It was in a different city, one about 2 hours away from where we lived now. It meant uprooting everything, the life we had built, the comfort of our familiar surroundings, the friends and connections we had made over the years. But as I thought about it more, the opportunity began to seem too good to pass up. The promotion was a significant step up in my career, and the financial benefits would provide more for Emily and our family. It felt like it was time for something new. "I think we should do it," I said one night, as Mark and I sat on the couch, contemplating the possibilities. "I think it's the right move for us." And just like that, our lives began to change. The plan was to move to the regional city after Emily finished her 11th grade year. I began researching neighborhoods, schools, and everything I could about our new potential future. I felt a surge of excitement and anxiety. The prospect of a fresh start filled me with hope. I wanted to give Emily the opportunities that came with a new city, a better environment, and the promise of a brighter future for all of us. But as the plans took shape, so did an unsettling realization. There was someone I hadn't really considered. Someone whose influence over my life, though subtle, was powerful. My mother. I've always loved my mother, but in a way that's been complicated, tangled up in emotions I couldn't always untangle. She had raised me, after all, and it's hard to explain how you feel about someone who has been the person responsible for every corner of your life, even the parts that hurt. My mother's authority over me had always been absolute, even as I grew older. As I moved into adulthood, I began to see how my mother's expectations and overbearing nature shaped the way I interacted with the world. It was always about doing what was right, what was expected, what was going to keep the peace. Growing up, I didn't question it. But as I got older, I began to notice that she didn't give me room to truly explore my own wants. It wasn't about me anymore, it was about what she wanted, about what she thought was best for me. When I shared the news of the promotion and the move to the regional city, I could tell that her reaction was not going to be the easy, happy one I had hoped for. My mom had always been a constant presence in my life, her expectations were ingrained in me like a second skin. But even at my age, I still found myself feeling small when she raised her voice or made her feelings known. It was as if the years hadn't changed the fundamental dynamics of our relationship. "I just don't understand, Sarah," my mother said one afternoon, her voice laced with disappointment. "Why would you leave? You know how much we need you here. You can't just pick up and leave your family. You have a duty. Your father's getting older. And I'm not going to be here forever." Her words hit me harder than I had expected. I knew she would be upset. She had always made it clear how much she relied on me, emotionally and practically. But this was more than just the usual overbearing guilt trips. It was a reminder of the hold she had on my life. It was always about duty, about me sacrificing my own desires to make her feel needed, wanted. "I'm doing this for us," I said softly, trying to stand my ground. "This opportunity would mean a better life for our family, for Emily, for me. I need to do this, Mom. You've always told me to follow my dreams, to do what's best for my future, and this is what's best for us." She looked at me for a moment, her face crumpling as if the words stung too much. Her lips quivered slightly, and I could see the tears beginning to well up in her eyes. She didn't say anything for a while, but the silence was deafening. It wasn't the first time she had used tears to try to manipulate me into staying where she wanted me. I had become used to it over the years, the emotional manipulation that always seemed to have a hold on me, even now. "I gave you everything," she finally said, her voice shaky. "And now, you're just going to leave me behind." After all the sacrifices I made for you. I'm not going to live forever, Sarah. You're my daughter. You have a responsibility to be here. You can't just abandon us. Her words stung like a slap, and I felt my chest tighten. The guilt was overwhelming. But as much as I understood her need for me, I also knew I couldn't continue to live my life solely based on her expectations. I had a family now, and I couldn't let my own dreams fade away because I was tethered to the idea of always being her caregiver. I'm not abandoning you, I said, trying to stay calm. But I also can't stay here forever just because you want me to. I have to live my own life, too. She shook her head, her voice rising. You think it's easy for me, Sarah? You think I can just pretend that you don't belong here, in this town, with me? You're my only child. Your duty is to me. To your family. No matter how much you feed the wolf, it's never enough, is it? That old saying. The one that always seemed to hang over everything. No matter how much you feed the wolf. The message was clear, it didn't matter what I did, how much I gave, or how hard I tried. I would never be able to fulfill all of her expectations. It was an exhausting cycle, one that never ended. And suddenly, in that moment, I realized how much I had been carrying. How much of my own life had been wrapped up in trying to please her, trying to make her happy, trying to live up to an ideal that was never truly mine. She would never be satisfied, and I would always be caught in the web of her demands. I knew it was time to make a choice, but the weight of that decision felt crushing. The more I tried to explain my decision to my mother, the more it seemed like I was speaking a foreign language. The walls she had built around her emotions had become thicker over the years, and every word I said just bounced off them, never quite making it through. I had hoped, foolishly, that with time, she would understand. But as each conversation passed, it became increasingly clear that she would never be able to see things from my perspective. The guilt was suffocating. There was no escaping it. No matter what I did, she made sure I felt it, every time I didn't call, every time I went on with my life and didn't check in on her the way she expected. Even when I was doing what was best for my family, it felt like it was never enough. Her words echoed in my mind, no matter how much you feed the wolf. Her voice carried such weight that it twisted the love I had for her into something I could barely recognize. I'd find myself awake at night, staring at the ceiling, unable to shut off the thoughts. I'd picture her in that small house, alone, waiting for me to come to my senses and change my mind. I imagined her sitting by the window, looking out for my visit, her phone always within arm's reach, just in case I called. I didn't want to think about it, but the thought would haunt me, and I would ask myself, am I making the right decision? The burden of that question felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. I knew that moving was the right thing for me and my family, but every time I thought about the impact on my mother, my heart ached. It wasn't just her disappointment, it was the feeling that I was abandoning her, leaving her behind when she needed me most. But was she really in need? Or had she simply grown too dependent on me, a dependence that I had fostered over the years by fulfilling her every expectation? Mark noticed the change in me. He saw the stress, the sleepless nights, the way I seemed to crumble whenever my mom's tears started. He would try to comfort me, offering simple solutions, suggesting we talk to her together. But every time I did, her reactions only made me question my resolve more. She would cry, tell me that I was throwing away everything we had built, and beg me not to leave. It wasn't the begging that got to me, it was the despair in her voice. The ache of knowing that I was the one who had the power to fix it, but I couldn't. And it wasn't just the emotional pressure. Every day, my phone buzzed with reminders of my mother's needs. She would ask about the plans, about the move, and each time I gave her an answer, I could hear the crack in her voice. What about me? She would ask, voice trembling. You're just going to leave me behind. You're my only daughter. You owe me this. I never knew how to respond to that. What was the right thing to say? I did owe her, in some way. She had sacrificed so much for me, and I owed her everything. But did I owe her the life I had built? Did I owe her my future? Could I live with the guilt if I walked away? The guilt was suffocating, but the thought of staying, living in this small town, continuing to be the daughter she needed me to be, felt like suffocation too. The life we had here was comfortable, yes, but stagnant. There was so much more I wanted for myself and for Emily. But it was hard to shake off the feeling that I would be betraying my mother, betraying everything she had done for me. And then there was Emily. My daughter was growing up, and this move would open doors for her, give her opportunities one couldn't deny. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about her, and the life I wanted to provide for her. She deserved to grow up in a place where her potential could be fully realized, not held back by the same small town that held me for so many years. But as I made plans, as I looked into houses in the new city and researched schools for Emily, the more my mother's voice crept into my thoughts. Every decision I made, every step I took toward my new life, felt like one more step away from her. And every step away from her felt like I was betraying the very person who had raised me, who had given me everything. I would have conversations with Mark late into the night, trying to explain my confusion, my emotional exhaustion. He would listen, but I could see in his eyes the frustration growing, the impatience with the situation. He wanted me to be strong, to make the decision that was best for all of us. But how could I, when every time I did, I felt like I was betraying someone I loved so much? The emotional struggle continued, pulling me in every direction. My heart told me to move forward, to take the opportunity for the sake of my family. But my guilt, my mother's manipulative love, and the heavy weight of my sense of duty kept me locked in a cage of indecision. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was torn between two versions of myself, the person I was when I was with my mother, always the obedient daughter, always trying to do the right thing, and the person I was becoming, the woman who wanted to break free, to live a life based on her own choices and aspirations. The days stretched on, filled with more conversations, more internal debates, more sleepless nights. I found myself unable to escape the emotional gravity of it all. Every day, the pull of my mother's expectations grew heavier, and every night, I lay awake, the weight of the future pressing down on me. Emily was preparing for her final year of school, eager to finish and start the next phase of her life, one where her opportunities would be greater, her world wider. She didn't know the full extent of the struggle I was facing, but she could feel the tension. I saw it in the way she started to withdraw, the way her usual laughter seemed a little quieter, as if she, too, could sense the storm that was brewing in the house. I didn't want her to see me torn apart like this, but I couldn't hide it from her completely. Mark, too, was starting to withdraw, his patience wearing thin. I could see his frustration, but I understood it. He had always been the steady one, the one who made decisions easily, the one who knew what he wanted. But this wasn't easy for me. My mother's emotional manipulation was like a constant shadow over my decisions, over my every step. I had grown so used to being her emotional support, her confidant, her reason for everything, that it was hard to imagine a life without being so deeply entangled in her needs. But was it really my responsibility to continue living for her? One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, alone. The house was quiet, and outside, the sky was starting to darken. My phone buzzed with another message from my mother, reminding me of how much she needed me, how much she was depending on me to stay. Her words were the same as always, full of guilt and emotional pleas. "You're all I have left. What am I supposed to do without you?" I stared at the message for a long time, the words blurring in front of me as I felt the tears well up. For a moment, I felt like I might crumble under the weight of it all. But then something shifted inside me. I thought of Emily, of Mark, of the future I was working toward. I thought of the woman I wanted to be, the person who was strong enough to make choices for herself, not just for the people around her. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't keep living this way. I walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The decision I had to make seemed simple in theory. I knew what was best for my family. I knew that taking the promotion and moving to the regional city would open up so many doors for us, especially for Emily. But the emotional burden was overwhelming. When Mark came into the room, I could tell he could feel the shift in me. He sat down beside me, and for a few moments, we didn't speak. There was no need. He knew how much this had been tearing me apart. "I think it's time to make a choice, Sarah," he said quietly. His voice wasn't angry, just resigned. "I've stood by you, I've tried to understand. But we can't keep going like this. You've given so much of yourself to your mother, and it's not enough. It's never going to be enough. You've done everything you can. But you have to think about us now. About your future. About your happiness." His words, though simple, broke through the fog in my mind. I had given so much of myself to my mother, so much of my life had been spent trying to meet her needs. But in doing that, I had lost sight of my own. The career I had worked hard for, the future I wanted for Emily, for myself, it was all slipping away. I felt a quiet resolve settle in my chest, like a piece of me that had been missing finally clicked into place. "You're right," I said softly, more to myself than to him. "It's time." That night, I called my mother. I didn't want to do it. I had avoided it for days, but it was time. Her voice trembled when she answered, just as I knew it would. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, my heart racing as I tried to steady my breath. "I don't want to hear it, Sarah," she replied immediately. "You're not going anywhere. You're my daughter, and you owe me this." "I've given you everything, Mom," I said, my voice trembling. "But I can't keep living my life for you. I have to live for me now. I'm moving forward with the job offer. I have to do this for Emily. For myself." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear her breathing, slow and heavy, and for a moment, I thought she might say something else. Something to make me stay. But she didn't. She just whispered, "I thought you loved me." "I do, Mom. But I can't keep giving everything and never getting anything back. I need this for my family. I need this for me." There was a long pause before she finally said, her voice cold, "Then I guess you've made your choice." I closed my eyes and let out a deep breath. It felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it also felt like the right thing. There was no turning back now. I had made my decision. I couldn't continue to live in the shadow of my mother's control. I had to take the leap, even if it meant breaking her heart in the process. Wow. This story really resonates with me on so many levels. The emotional complexity, the tug-of-war between duty and personal freedom, the guilt of choosing your own happiness over the needs of someone you love, it's all so painfully real. I felt the weight of every decision the protagonist made, especially when it came to her relationship with her mother. The emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, the endless expectation to be everything for someone, it's something a lot of people can relate to, even if the circumstances are different. What struck me the most was the gradual realization that, despite her love for her mother, she could not continue sacrificing herself. It was heartbreaking to see how much she loved her mother, but also how stifled she felt by the weight of those expectations. The line about, "No matter how much you feed the wolf," hit hard, because it's so true. No matter what she did, it would never be enough for her mother. And that realization, choosing herself, took a lot of courage. I also felt for her in the final conversation with her mother. It's not easy to break away from toxic patterns, especially when there's so much emotional history tied up in the relationship. It must have been gut-wrenching for her to make that choice, but in the end, she did what was best for her own family and future. There's something incredibly empowering about her decision to finally prioritize herself. But at the same time, I can't help but feel for her mother, too. The loneliness, the fear of being left behind, it's all so tragic. It's like she can't let go, and that's what makes it so complex. The balance between familial duty and the need for personal growth is such a delicate one. In the end, the story is a poignant reminder that it's okay to choose your own path, even when it feels like you're breaking someone's heart. It's a difficult, messy decision, but sometimes, it's the only choice you can make to preserve your own happiness and the well-being of those who truly matter in your life.